supervision or introductory courses. Nevertheless, if you appeal to the transfer officer or sometimes the undergraduate departmental representative, you can garner credit for work you've done. It's very important if you're wanting to finish in 4 years or even 5, if you spent 2 years at a community college, that you get 2 years' worth of credit. Another possible source of credit, by the way, that sometimes students don't think of is summer internships or life experience courses. Depending on what school you are at, and also if you are a returning student or another sort of student, you might be able to get credits for work you've done elsewhere. And of course, given that you're trying to amass 120-odd credits, the more you can garner, the more you can gather, the better it is. Now, there are some other tips having to do with things that the students themselves can take up and certain very, very common mistakes students make that retard their progress. One of them you gestured at earlier was the double or triple major, that students think it's a special badge of prestige that employers, they believe, will like to major. And in some cases, it does make sense. If you're interested, for example, in political science, a major or even a minor in Arabic language is of great value. However, you should be aware that every time you add a major, you add a 10 to 12 course load, which can be a real burden, especially since, in many cases, you don't pick all the courses. We advise that except in very special circumstances, students stick to one major. And even a minor, which is a series of 5 or 6 courses, many required, we think if you have a secondary interest, you should put together your own package of 3 or 4 or 5 courses that you really would like to take.
Jeremy, I think that's a very important point. Well, the beginning of your point is really important, which is to be an advocate for yourself, which has to do with even the earlier point that you mentioned and that I advocate, which is that the first financial award offer that you get shouldn't be what you consider the final financial award offer. The same thing should be for the credit that you're obtaining for the courses that you have. And I think definitely students, they're uncomfortable to try to fight for themselves for some reason, and parents don't realize enough to encourage their students to fight for some of those, to make sure that they get as much credit as they want, because those extra credits suddenly add up to a half year or a full year, and commonly the cost of living is a full year, and it might take that much longer to get a job when we know that half the graduates are graduating without jobs today and taking 6 months to find a job.
Also, by the way, sometimes students fail a requirement. Now, in many schools, you need just a D, as in dog, to pass a requirement, and in some schools, you need a C, as in Charles. Now, if a student is close to passing, whatever the level is, we very much in our advising encourage students to try to pass the course, because not only we taking a course is time inefficient, we see students who take a math requirement 2 and 3 times. Each time they take it, they don't really do any better, and they think next time it'll be different. But if you take a few requirements each 2 or 3 times, that's really a big waste of time. But the other hidden cost is taking the same course again can be a depressant. And recent studies show that a full third of college students report that they're unhappy or despondent after just 1 semester of college. Another thing, by the way, that can help students be in a good mood is to each semester be sure they take 1 requirement or 1 course that they really enjoy doing. No matter how close or how far it is to their major, they should take one thing that they really like, because enthusiasm breeds motivation, and the more motivated you are, the quicker you will finish.
I think it's now ideally that students is going to like some of the courses that are in their major, because it may likely lead to their career, and I think that leads to the whole idea of if you're taking these courses you don't like, then hopefully the career, I think maybe part of that depression comes from the fact that they're worried that their career is not going to fit what they want to do. I'm not sure if that's the case, but in some cases it may be. I think that's a horrible statistic, and that's really terrible.
It also can be the case. For example, my nephew is interested in becoming a clinical psychologist. He's at Pitzer College in Pomona, and he finds that in taking a psychology major, there are many, many, many courses you have to take in all different branches of psychology. You have to take cognitive psychology, behavioral psychology, statistics, deviant psychology, all different kinds. So even though he has a very focused, career-oriented interest in clinical, the major as constitute has lots of different things, some of which presumably he's not as eager to take.
Yeah, and so much of the same, or what I guess we can think of as depressing or tough courses that follow, and a lot of examples of things that may be hard to manage. That's a great example where you could be overwhelmed. I think the same can be said of taking very difficult science classes and taking all of them and not having something that's a departure from that.
Science classes are especially challenging because students have taken biology or physics or chemistry at high school, and some have even taken the AP tests or the so-called SAT-2 tests and done okay. Maybe they've gotten a 3, but when they get into college, they find out that you really need to know the stuff. And the other thing is, in some of the math and science courses, you have to do theory. Suppose, for example, at your high school you've taken the Calculus AB course and you take a calculus sequence at a major college, all of a sudden you're doing delta epsilon proofs, not just lots of little problems. So I think the transition, especially in the sciences, is quite difficult for many students. The other thing, by the way, and this is a hot issue in American higher education now, is the role of women in so-called STEM fields. It's, I think, pretty well documented that women have trouble acclimating themselves in certain universities, in certain male-dominated departments. It's better now. Many universities now have women presidents and women chairs of different science and math departments, which is good and an important step. But it still is the case that the professions, in certain cases, are male-dominated, and women students feel uncomfortable.
Are there?
Go ahead.
So I think one of the departures could be for women who are, and I'm a woman who went into a very male-dominated engineering field as an undergraduate. It was fun to take economics because there were way more women in my class. So that kind of falls to your example of finding examples of other classes. Are there any other programs in place to help those women in those types of programs?
Could we come back for a second to what you just said? Do you remember what it was like the first day in engineering, what that was like?
Oh, sure. I mean, the being the only woman in the field, it's going to be different for everyone. In some ways, you're special because you're the only one. In some ways, you may think differently than the rest of the class. All the professors were men. There were no women engineering, 30 years ago when I was in college. But it's so it was part of. There was a combination of, am I going to be discriminated against, to, well, I'm kind of special. So there's a combination of those two things that some people excel at, and some people are like, holy smokes, I need to get out of here.
Did you have occasion to interact with a lot of the male professors, and if so, what was that like?
Oh, I think at that time, 30 years ago, the male professors were very uncomfortable having women in their classes. So I definitely struggled on that side of it much more than my male peers. But I think, I hope that today it's it is a little bit easier, and but still for example, engineering, we still don't have more than, on average, I think 20 or 25% of women that are in engineering. So it's still a very male-dominated field. So it's something to think about how to make yourself successful. And I'm not sure, if I remember back 30 years ago, whether more women or men were graduating in 4 years. A lot of the women who were there were very academically minded, so most of them were graduating quicker. I don't know if that's the case with the men. But before we leave the show, Jeremy, I'd love to hear a couple of high points from your book, The Secrets of College Success. The Secrets of College Success. So maybe you can share a couple of points on that book for our audience.
The book is called The Secrets of College Success. It's co-authored by me and by my wife, Lynn Jacobs. It contains over 600 tips for college. These are easily implementable, also entertaining suggestions about how students can get the most out of college. The secret of the book, more than anything else, is that it gives the professor's perspective, a kind of a behind-the-scenes look at what the professors are really thinking. The reason is that we think that students would succeed at college if they only knew what their teachers were thinking. It covers all different kinds of issues about college: time management, study skills, how to know what the professor is looking for in papers and tests, going to see the professor both in person and electronically by email and Skype, and also some tips of a more financial and career-oriented nature, things about how to pick a major, how to raise money for college, and finally how to interview for and get a job. In
Jeremy,
short, it covers the highest moments of college in a brief format.
Jeremy, I enjoyed your book. Thanks so much for sharing it with me. And I encourage everyone, all my audience, to order that book. We have a link to the book. The Secrets of College Success is the website, that Jeremy's website. And there's also a link on our website, collegesmartradio.com, under resources and links. If you're currently a college student or plan on being one, you'll really want to check out this book. Well, that wraps up another weekly show of College Smart Radio. Thanks so much for being with us, Jeremy.
Thanks very much. It was a real pleasure talking with you.
We hope you picked up some new information today that helps you figure out ways to manage the runaway costs of college. You can hear us each week here on KDOW 1220 AM, Saturdays at 3 p.m. For a link to a podcast of this show and our prior weekly shows, go to our website, www.collegesmartradio.com. Also, plan on joining us at one of our upcoming Westface College Planning workshops. Our last two workshops in 2012 are Saturday, December 8th and Wednesday, December 12th. December is a popular month with families preparing to file their FAFSA in January, so we do run out of seats. You do need to reserve your seat at the workshop. You can do so from our show's website, www.collegesmartradio.com. This is Beatrice Schultz. Thanks for tuning in to College Smart Radio. We look forward to sharing more helpful information with you next week.
You've been listening to College Smart Radio with certified financial planner Beatrice Schultz. If you have questions on today's topic, log on to collegesmartradio.com or call area code 650-587-1559. That's 650-587-1559. Join us next week at this time for another edition of College Smart Radio on AM 1220 KDOW.